Welcome to the Digital Coffee Break presented by Scrapineers.com. My name is Tiffany Tillman Emanuel, founder and educator for Scrapineers, and I'm always delighted to be your hostess today. Let me introduce you to our guest today. She is the uber talented, full of eye candy projects, Judie Barger. Judie is a self described Photoshop addict and has been creating digital art for the last 5 years. In addition to digital creations, she also enjoys photography, painting, and creating mixed media canvases. She's currently on several creative teams, and in her spare time, she creates under the name Artful Musings. In addition to her artful creations and spending time with her lovely family, Judie also enjoys football, Harry Potter, and Starbucks. Welcome to the show, Judie.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's great to be here.
We're delighted to have you. So, what's the clustering demo you wanted to show
Okay,
us?
so what I was planning on doing is, and we'll see how this goes. I thought I would just start and build a cluster really quickly. So if you want to see my process,
Sure, yeah.
this is another tip. This is another white background page.
Hmm.
And if the kit doesn't come with the stamps that you want, you can build those with the background pages.
Hmm.
Background papers. So that's what I've done here, and all I've done is add a mask to it. I
Hmm.
added a black mask, which is just Alt and then the mask key,
Yeah, a
and it'll
reverse
come out black.
mask.
And then I have a ton of grungy brushes. You don't want to see my brush palette, which I actually just cleaned out because it was getting completely out of control.
Hmm.
But I just used a couple of different watercolor and grungy brushes and added these two background papers. This is a
Hmm.
kit by Digilicious Designs, and it is called Stand By You is the kit.
Okay.
Right. So, and I cheated a little bit and kept the photo on here already because I actually had to change, I changed the coloring on
Hmm.
Scott's shirt a little bit to match the background
Okay.
colors. I didn't want to
All
have
right.
to do that again.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would start with the background like this, and then I'm going to pull up, I have a folder. This isn't the way I usually scrap because I have dual monitors, so I generally would keep and I use AC/DC to organize my kits, and so I would usually have AC/DC over in the other monitor. So
Gotcha.
we're going to do it this way. Move this over. Okay. And a lot of times so I do the background, some kind of paint stuff on the background to get that where I want it to be. And I'm probably going to add more to that too. And then I would add the frame, figure out where. I love these ornate wooden type of frames.
Hmm.
We're going to put
They
that
are
on top of
gorgeous.
the photo. Now, since the frame is larger than the photo, I'm not going to clip the photo to it, to
Hmm.
anything underneath it. And then I add, here's my heavy frame shadow,
Wow.
right?
You see how quick that was, guys? That was so, she just went heavy frame photo. You know, I love that.
Yes. Having them organized like this is a huge, huge help to me.
Hmm.
It really is. And I would want, I like to add, let's see, let's add some ribbons to the background. Right. And sometimes I don't use the shadow. My ribbon shadow is a little bit bigger than this, but a lot of times I'll use my paper shadow on the ribbon.
Hmm.
And what else is in here? I'm trying to do it quickly. Sorry, it's not.
Oh, no, no. Take your.
Oh,
We
washi
don't
tape is the
mind,
other
do
thing.
we?
Love washi tape. Love washi tape. And I like using it on the background because you don't have to worry as much about the shadowing. So I
Hmm.
just have a flat washi tape shadow, which is really just a vellum shadow, honestly.
Hmm.
It may be yours, Tiffany,
Okay.
from your shadowing class. I don't remember. I think I
It might
probably took
be.
yours and tweaked it. It's
Yeah.
just it adds just a little bit to it, but not much. Now, if this were on top of something, that's when you would use the burn and dodge to make it look like it's adhering to whatever it's holding on to the page. But when you use
Hmm.
it on the just in the background, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
So, um, here's some more stamps. Ah, there we go. Love.
Hmm.
So that's going to go on the bottom. And again, this is just a plain white background. So I've just
Mm-hmm.
added the paper mask to it. And these are stamps just from the kit.
Mm-hmm. I love watching others work in Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. I love to see how that process comes together,
Let me
you know?
see. I don't know if I put, where's the other stamp? Okay. Oh, I like confetti too. Confetti is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I use it not just in the background. I'm probably gonna add a really slight shadow to that. I like to add it in the middle sometimes of a cluster. It's not in the same place. So let's do some of my favorite stuff. Let's do leaves. Oh, love this.
So you really start from before you add all of those flowers and stuff. It looks like you start from the ground up, you know, and
I
build your
do.
foundations first,
Well, I
and
try to
then.
start with the background first, and adding
Mhm.
whatever paint, and then I normally put the photo where if it's going to be a photo page. If it's me,
Mhm.
it's probably going to be one photo. So I add
Mhm.
that. I figure out where I want that, and a lot of times that'll change.
Mhm.
But I figure out at least the first where I want that, and then I just start building around it. Right?
Okay.
So leaf, and I like adding different kinds of leaves. This one, let's do one on this. Sometimes I just add the cluster to one side. Sometimes I'll put it on two. Whoops.
Mhm.
I love Control Z. That is awesome.
Yes.
Another one of the awesome things about digital scrapbooking, because you really don't have that with paper.
No. That's why we're lucky. We're part of the lucky clan
Yeah.
because we don't have to worry about all of those issues. I've broken so many papers, beautiful papers. When I started CTing for Basic Gray, I really didn't want to open up the package because it was like, man, there's only a few papers here that I can use and still do decent.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I have so many pages that gorgeous papers that I haven't used because I'm like, but then I'll want to use it again.
Right,
Maybe it's
right.
not the right page. It may not be the
Yeah,
perfect page for the $2 piece of paper that I bought.
exactly, exactly. So I just started collecting Basic Gray packs and started, oh
Uh,
gosh, and
I
then I would
love
be
basic
scared to
gray
send them.
too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I
the
think
other
it.
thing, oh, I'm
Mhm,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
The other thing that, and I didn't necessarily realize this at first, that I know now is it's usually not great to make elements larger in the kit,
Mm.
as
Mhm.
opposed to smaller, because you can get some distortion. If you're just making them a little bit larger, it's going to be fine and no one's going to notice it. But
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to take this flower and blow it up this size
Right. Right.
on
It
the page.
introduces a lot of pixelation and stuff. So
Right.
yeah, if it's going to be larger than 10%, then don't go any further than that. So.
So, and I did not know that. I don't think I've ever blown up elements that big. Right,
Mhm.
so when I'm building a flower cluster, I'm trying to use an odd number generally
Mhm.
of flowers.
Mhm.
And so let's do this. See, I'm breaking my own rule. I'm making just a little bit bigger.
Well, a little bit bigger. That's good though. So it still looks in pristine shape. You know.
And I'm going to put this under the frame. I like it right there.
It's really cool. And so yeah, it's to me it's so much like floral design and you're putting different little pieces in and then you say does this look good over here and then you're just adding on top of that, you know?
Yeah, and a lot of it's just moving it around too. Okay, so
Mhm.
where does it look best?
Mhm.
Um, on the page, resizing it. If you're using multiple, like if I wanted to use another one of these blue flowers,
Mhm.
then I would make it a different size. So I would make
Mhm.
it probably smaller, and I would rotate it because that will
Okay.
make it look different. Right, so
Mhm.
then it doesn't look, then I think it's more noticeable where I have the exact same element that's exactly the same size and the same orientation in three different places. But if I change the size a little bit, make it smaller or a little bit larger and change the orientation, then it almost looks like a different flower. So it's
Right.
not as noticeable
Right.
that
No,
you're
that makes
using
sense.
the same flower again. Um, and so, and I will tell you, I've said this before, I really don't have a specific process. Every page comes together a little bit differently, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And one thing that I love to do is I will just go through a kit sometimes if I don't really know what I want the page to look like, and I'll pull out all the elements that I love and I'll put them all on the page and then I'll just start playing with them. So when I
Mm.
put them on, I'm just throwing them on the page. I'm not thinking about where I want them to go or what the stacking order should be. I'm just throwing them around on the page. And then
Right.
I start moving them around and playing with them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one way that I think you can practice. I think it's fun. Some people might not agree with that. I think it's kind of fun to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gets you used to the clustering
Mm-hmm.
too, and
It's
how to do that and what things look good and
right. Now, one thing I saw, especially on your page, I think it was the Keep It Together. Was it the Keep It? No, no, no. It was the Into the Woods. And you
yeah.
had taken it maybe almost, maybe looks like two, three, four flowers and grouped them on top of one another. They were directly on top of one another.
That probably, let me see if I can, let me pull that up real quick.
No, it wasn't Into
Is
the
it this
Woods.
one?
No, it was well, you have them
You are the
open, so you
one?
can let's look at that one. Yes, you are the one. And you see how you
Oh,
have
right
all
here.
those little flowers pieces, right? Like the yellow one, you have that little red button, and then right underneath that, you have the white, and then another yellow flower, and then another yellow flower. And that is, I don't think to do that, you know?
Well, the yellow flower came that way. Here's the yellow flower.
Oh, okay.
So it was, I mean, you can build that, and I've done that before. You can definitely
Mhm.
build flowers. And that's one way if you have a kit that only has maybe a couple of flowers in it, you
Mhm.
can build your own flower. If you want, I call it fluffy, but if you want fluffier, more dimensional flowers, then you can
Mhm.
build them that way.
I love that term, fluffy flowers.
So, and I really, this is the button actually, if you look at this element, came with the string in it. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I put the string on that. I think it came with it.
Mhm.
And I positioned it so it's not right on top of it's on top of it, but it's the word art tag is in between the two, so that the
Mm.
string goes over the top of the tag,
Mhm.
right? Even though um, it's not right on top of the flower. So I like to do that too, where you're layering. So this
Right.
looks like it's all one piece, but it's not,
Got you.
and
Okay.
because of
Well,
the way the string is
thanks.
positioned.
Yeah. Well, thanks for showing us that real quick. We can go back to
Okay,
the
sorry.
demo. No, you're fine. You're fine.
So what else would I add to this? I'd probably add another flower. Let's put another flower
Yeah.
there.
So, and I see that this um from that layout that you were showing us to keep it together, I see that how you're putting the flowers on top of one another and they're in such close proximity that sometimes I'm like, well, did it come like that or did she do that? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it came like that, and sometimes
Hmm.
I'm building it myself.
Mm.
Okay, so I like when I have the clusters going. I'm pointing to my computer like you can see me. When I have the clusters going on the sides like this, I
Hmm.
like to have kind of a line right here. Um, and I generally do it toward the bottom of the page.
Hmm.
But then, so I would build this line with some, let's find some linear elements. Ooh, the hearts. Those are cool. Let's do the hearts. Um, they need to be a little bit smaller. You can add them. And this happens to me all the time. See, I put the washi tape on and now I've covered it up with elements. So I need to
Right.
move that out.
Yeah.
And this needs to go below the leaves. So I end up moving things up and down
Hmm.
in the layers palette a lot too.
Hmm.
To kind of get what I want. And then sometimes I'll take an element like this and I'll just leave it on this side and I'll have something else over here, like, let's see, a tag, for example. Right, and I probably need another. Let's see if I've got another ribbon open.
So it's really you're creating a sense of fullness as you're putting pieces down and you're thinking about, okay, this kit that I'm working with, what other pieces can I add that's going to create this sort of sense of fullness on the cluster or the group of clusters you're building.
Exactly.
So you don't
Exactly.
actually, and that's pretty cool because for me, I have to kind of look at clusters separately. But what you're doing is you're seeing like the entire page as a group of clusters together. And so you're not concentrating on cluster A or cluster B or cluster C. You're putting things, it's like you started with leaves and you added leaves and then you added flowers and now you're on to more linear stuff. It's more layering rather than clustering, focusing on individual clusters. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and that's absolutely true.
Mm.
One other shortcut I will tell you, and you can create your own shortcuts for different things. And so if you're working in Photoshop and you need to do what I just did, which was I just cut off a part of that element, you
Mm-hmm.
have to rasterize it before you do that. And so I created my own shortcut for that, which for me
Okay.
is Control Shift R. But it
Mm-hmm.
just made it, I don't know, to me it's a lot easier than you can also go into the element itself. Oh, is it left click? Whoops. Right click. And rasterize layer style or rasterize layer is what you would need to do. This one's already
Okay.
rasterized, that's why it's showing that.
So you've gone into your system and created hotkeys in Photoshop's preferences menu.
Yes.
So that
Yeah,
way, or action keys, or which depending on if you're Mac or PC, and that way you can quickly make changes, rasterize, rotate, even if you wanted to do that. So it
exactly.
made it
For
so much easier. Yeah.
the things that you use the most, and you'll figure
Mm-hmm.
that out as you're going along, what things you're going to use, what steps you use the most, then
Mm-hmm.
create shortcuts for them, and it'll make the clustering go even faster.
Okay. I mean, this is coming along so smashingly well, and I can see how a big part of what makes it a success for you too is because you're moving so quickly. You've taken a lot of time to go, as you've learned, in the last 5 years of being a digital scrapbooker, to organize your styles, the ones that you use a lot, and create shortcuts and actions and stuff. So that way, this process isn't as time consuming. Because if somebody says, hey, I can create a full page like this with all of these clusters in 30, 45 minutes, some of us are going, it's impossible. But now look, watching you work, it's like, oh, that makes complete sense. Your shadows are already organized. You've already done the most important steps, the administrative steps and the management steps. So that way, when you're ready to sit down and design, you can just design.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge help to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's something honestly that you develop over time. I mean, I would say didn't start doing that. I didn't start organizing my styles, or creating the shortcuts. I've probably done that in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a learning process.
Yeah. I think once a year, I like to go through my stuff and really reorganize, kind of like a spring cleaning.
Yeah.
And we haven't done this before, but this year I do want to host with Scrappiniers, and everyone in the room is a peer, so you guys can know this. But I want to do a spring cleaning event called the Pixel Purge that basically, says, okay, excuse me, we're gonna go through our computer and hook up our styles and whatever we need to do, clean off our EHD, but it'd be guided, like Restoration Station where it was a 5-day event and it was guided, you know.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Oh,
Lisa
I
said,
could use
yeah,
some of that therapy.
yes, yeah. So that's my goals. I have a couple of 5-day events planned, or they're at least on the schedule. They're at least on the calendar, um, so that way we can do the administrative stuff. That if you're kind of not doing it, it makes life so much harder. Now you did some cool stuff with your shadow, and I was talking. So what did you do?
Well, what I did, and I love to do this, and this is a trick. I love warping shadows. That's what I was talking about earlier. So, like here, I just have my regular shadows on here, and I don't think we have time for me to go through and warp everything. But I would warp the leaf shadows a little bit, especially these on the side.
Mm-hmm.
string shadow I would warp. And I've warped, and still want to play with this because it's not exactly how I want it, but I warped the shadow for the my title here, which is made up of word strips, to
Mm-hmm.
make it look like it's actually I've glued parts of it to the page, and
Mm-hmm.
then other parts are showing up a little bit more, are coming
Gotcha.
off the page a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And my current favorite tool for that is the wave filter.
Mm.
And that is a trick that I learned from Tracy Reed.
Okay.
So, and I love that. I've been waving lots of things
Can you show
recently,
us that
just
dialogue? You
playing
don't have to
around with
do
it.
it because you were doing it then, but you went to filter.
So
And
it's
for anyone who
filter,
wants to know,
the
distort.
store. Now I just clicked up here because this is the last filter that you've used, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was already up there. So
Mm-hmm.
once you play with the settings and get it to what you want it to be, you can just click in up here, or I think it's Control F is the shortcut for the most recent used filter. So you can do
Mm-hmm.
it that way too. But it's distort wave, and then you play around with the generator numbers, which computers. You're going to want that to be pretty small, probably one or two. We can try three and see how that works. The wavelength you're also going to want to be pretty small, or pretty large, I'm sorry. Otherwise and I don't have anything selected, so it's not showing in the box, but otherwise they're going to be really peaky, very sharp, and that's not what you want. You want a smooth, very subtle wave. And so it goes up to 9.99, and you're going to want it somewhere probably between 8.50 and that 9.99. So you can play around with that depending on the element too, because you may want something different for each
Mm-hmm.
element, and then the amplitude. You're going to want a fairly small range, so I would say somewhere between probably 1 and 3. We can do 2, and probably maybe 18 to 23. So let's try 22. And oh, it just warped this, which is not what I wanted it to do, or
Right. It
waved that.
warps your
But
star.
anyway, so the first thing you need to do is get your shadow on a separate layer.
Okay.
And that's easy to do in Photoshop. I actually created my own shortcut for that too, so I can do that really quickly. Or let me take this as a drop shadow. If you go into, how do you do that?
Well, first you would
You have to,
create your shadow, and then
yeah,
you have to
is it right?
unexpand it.
Whoops.
No, you have to. There you go, and then right click
And then
over
right
drop
click over.
shadow, and then
Got
it would
it.
say create layer in Photoshop. In Photoshop Elements, you need a tutorial,
Yeah,
and that's cool if
and
you need one.
that
I
was
have a
one of
free
the
one
best
on my
things about
blog,
switching to
so
Photoshop for me. Oh,
yes,
here we go, create
it's
layer.
a little bit harder in Photoshop Elements. So if you're using PSE, I will make sure in these show notes that it's underneath, that I link to it so you guys will be able to see it. Or we'll find a way to get it to you.
Right. So instead of going through all of that, that's why I create a shortcut for that, because I do this all the time,
Hmm.
and not just to warp shadows, but to apply different effects to them. So that's
Right,
another one of my shortcuts. So now we have the
right.
shadow on a separate layer. You can go to filter, distort, wave, and again, play around with the settings until you get it to something that you want, and then click OK, and you can see the warp. Now, what
Mm.
I found with this is most of the time I'm going to want to take the opacity down. For whatever
Hmm.
reason, when I do that, the opacity goes up. And so
Ah,
I generally
okay.
play around with the opacity once it's warped. And
So
you can,
before you,
because it's on a separate layer, you can also move it around.
right.
So just
So
click the
before you move
transform
forward,
tool, and
hold on,
you
I just want
can
to,
you can warp it with other tools then too, because it's on its own separate layer. So
right. So before you move forward, do us a favor, open up your history panel so we can see like the before and after, if you don't mind. And then zoom in to where your leaf is.
I'm sorry, where am I? Oh, I don't use the history panel, so.
Oh, okay. But it's
Oh,
still
sorry.
okay. But it's still tracking what you're doing. So if you want,
But well, here, let me
yeah.
see if I can
No, no, no. Just zoom in for us.
on the
Zoom into your
layout.
page. Yeah, on your layout.
Okay.
And then, yeah, so we can see that part. And then in your history panel, what you'll want to do is open up your history panel again because it's been saving it for you. Okay, so then you have the layer on the it's on layer, and then all the way down in the history panel, go back down to what I think it was free transform. No, no, not that. Yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
okay.
Okay, so click on create layers again, and then click on free transform.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. And that shows us the before and after so we could see what it looked like. So that's the create letters. And then click on wave because that's actually the first one, step one and step two. Ooh, you guys see it now? Isn't that cool? So when you were
So
on
there's
create
the wave.
layers, that was the original shadow that Photoshop created. And then when you click on wave, that's the shadow that was created after you waved it. And that does give it such a really realistic appearance. Very cool technique. Thank you.
Oh, it's Tracy's. It's all Tracy.
Okay. Well, we're
She
cool
is
that
amazing.
Tracy's teaching with us. So thank you, Tracy. That's awesome.
No, I
What?
and I have been obsessed with that since I learned that. I've been playing with
That's
it on
cool.
everything. And
Yeah.
I will say right now it doesn't work on every element.
Oh, of course, of course.
So it works. I do like the way it works on leaves. I will say that. I
Hmm.
think she uses it or has used it on the flat element, so I love that look too. But that's exactly what I did with the word strips here. And so I
Right.
wouldn't use it on the frame. And it honestly, it doesn't look that great on the flowers. That
Hmm.
and it may be just because I haven't played with it. So I would probably use it on the like the ribbon elements, this tag element. You do that, and now you can just go in now that we've already used it and click wave, and it'll do it
Right. Based on the
without
last
changing it.
settings.
And sometimes it's very subtle, and you need to play around a little bit with the settings to get what you want because you're gonna it's gonna be different for each element.
Right.
So
Well, this
that would be
page
the
is
last thing that I would do is I would go through and figure out what elements I want to now I would tweak the shadows. So that's when I would distort them or maybe just play with the opacity of them. So go into the drop shadow
well,
and
don't go too much further because we're running out of time.
okay.
So, but it looks amazing, and I can see it just, it's an amazing page that you're putting together. Thank you so much for showing us the process. But I can tell the little details. I mean, if you hadn't had all the organization and stuff, it would be very hard to put it all together so quickly. But I mean, it's a
It would.
fantastic process. And so I can tell, it's just like, wow. But thank you so much for showing us.
Oh,
I'm going
thank
to
you.
take you out of the sharing so we can wrap up here.
Okay.
Um, and then you can join us in the Adobe Connect room. But wow, you guys, have you learned from you guys who are here in the room with us? Did that really open up some ways that you guys could embellish? It did for me. I learned some new tricks. I'm excited to use them.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Yeah, Kathy says she loved watching you work. Jensen, she learned a lot.
Oh,
I know
thanks.
she says very inspirational. So thank you so much for your time. That's a lot of embellishing. Holy cow. Woo.
It is. It is.
But you
And
make
I do, before we leave, I have a couple of tips
uh-huh. Okay.
for people who are just starting. The
Hmm.
one is the one that I showed is to find a background paper that has a shape that you want and use that to practice the embellishments with.
Hmm.
And the other one is to start with some templates that are very clustery. And
Mm.
that can help you because that's honestly, I started using templates that were very clustery. And then what I ended up doing is I would take other templates that weren't, but use those kind of as my background and then add to them. But
That's
that just taught that helped me a lot to learn where to put things and what looked good and what didn't look good. And before I kind of launched into doing my own pages. And I'm on Cheryl's Fiddle DD Designs template team, but other than that, I normally don't use templates at all anymore. So I think you'll find after a while that you get to the point where it's almost easier to create it yourself.
wow. That's a very good tip. And I think that's like one of the if you're also new to digital scrapbooking, but you're new to clustering as well, and you find some hard stuff, taking those clusters and then moving
Yeah.
them over to the template, that is a really good tip. I know for me as a template designer, I've had people say, I combine this from someone's template and then use yours for the structure or the base of it. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Your page looks amazing. So
Yeah.
whatever works. But it's kind of funny because it's almost like template designers who are clustery, they can actually sometimes lose the page and just make template clusters. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah. Well, I've has seen some of those out there. I don't know if they're still making them or not, but I know
Mhm.
there used to be. I haven't seen any recently, but there
Yeah,
used to be
that'd be
just
cool.
clusters that you could get.
Well, maybe we need to let them know. They need to watch this so they can bring it back.
Yeah, really.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Digital Coffee Break. Thank you so much, Judy B, for showing us your amazing embellishment clusters in your process.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You guys, you can find her, Judy B's blog at artfullyinspiredmusings.blogspot.com. Of course, we will link you to it in the show notes that you're watching. And thank you to our live audience. You guys, I appreciate you so much for dropping by, especially on short notice. So thank you guys. And thanks to you, our lovely viewers who support our video cast. I'm Tiffany Tillman Emanuel. Find me over at simplytiffanystudios.com. We'll see you again for the next digital coffee break. And remember, keep creating those beautiful digital memories because no one can capture your piece of the world quite like you can.